Jim Joyce.
Hey, you made it.
I made it. Going crazy. For all the listeners and viewers, we typically record at 7:30 p.m. CET.
Yeah.
And Marina and I were just getting to Milan. So crazy traffic, plane, 20 minutes delayed. So, but we made it, half hour
You made
late.
it, man. Yep.
Looking
Let the
forward to
stress.
seeing everyone in here. Frontiers Health kicks off
Exciting.
tomorrow.
Yeah. You got
ready.
a big agenda. How are you doing? Are you making lots of meetings? What's your conference attack approach? You're speaking, obviously.
Yeah, so looking forward to once again interviewing Glenn. I was joking around with John Halleck that I think I'm going to start charging for personal interviewing of Glenn, but no, I do enjoy it. Then I am moderating a panel on telehealth and is tele everything the answer. Then Marina and I, who is can see her hiding in the corner in the back there. Yes, we can see you. We're hosting a Your Coach health coaching hour, so to educate people on that. So tune in. That's 3 p.m. tomorrow.
Isn't she interviewing someone? She's interviewing someone famous. Is she? So
that's next week is our. Thanks for reminding me. Next week is our Global Health and Wellbeing Coaching Symposium. So Dan Ariely kicking us off. Many other amazing speakers and panels and all of that. So I'll post that to our YouTube channel. Yeah. But listen, I want to catch up, but I know, we're trying to squeeze because our next guest came all the way from US this morning and we're all rusty a bit with jet lag. So it's late 100%. Here in Milan and I think she kind of took a nap. So let's let her in. And Acacia Parks, who I had the pleasure of being on only I think 1 or 2 panels with her somewhere. But she is an amazing scientist and looking forward to getting to know her. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, Acacia.
Are you?
So I see alarmingly that you're both on camera. Does that mean I need to?
Are you not ready? Because it could be our first voice only. I know we got you out of bed. We got delayed. So thank you for making the time.
All right, let me see what I can do. I'm not indecent. I thought this might happen. So.
Beautiful.
Okay,
beautiful.
There we go. All good. So welcome to Europe. I guess you got in this morning, right?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Benvenuto.
You just reminded me that I have coffee.
Yes.
No, it's been lovely. We got in and got a chance to eat some small portion of Milan, but it is typically my objective whenever I travel somewhere new to eat close to all of it. That's the goal. So,
absolutely.
But we're well on our way.
Perfect.
Excellent.
That's what Marina and I go from, when we go to a new place, there's some sightseeing, but it's in between, local-ish food places and, et cetera.
Right.
And that's how
Definitely.
you get real culture, right? Or that's a good excuse, at least.
So first of all, I've said this to other guests, but I think you've trumped everyone else. Acacia, you have the coolest name. They have the Acacia is just as a starting point. I think that it's one of the best names we've had on the show. Eugene, you agree?
I agree. I was going to ask, what is there? I know there's an acacia plant or tree, or is there any connotation to that at all? When your parents
so it's after the winery in California, though I think the nuance that's missing so far is that my last name is Parks, which my husband really likes to remind me because acacia is a tree that a cruel game was played on me, and it was honestly I was 30 years old by the time I realized it because
right.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they named me after a winery in California where they used to vacation. My parents.
That sounds fantastic. Well, welcome to.
I like wine.
Welcome to the show.
It's in my name.
Jim meet Acacia. Acacia meet Jim. I was just saying before you kind of came in that I think you and I, we're sort of, I don't know, let's call it LinkedIn stalking for a while. Then we had the pleasure of being with Almirall on a conference, and that's the first time I think we actually have really,
definitely
engaged and spoken. So good to have you here, but. as we like to say for our millions of viewers and listeners, tell us who Acacia is, kind of a little bit of your history and story and how you got to what you're doing now.
Sure. I'm a psychologist by training. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, which is kind of like this amazing amalgam of, if you're going to be a psychology PhD, there's kind of no better place to get broad training in everything that works than the University of Pennsylvania. And so my origin story kind of begins as somebody who learned how to do cognitive therapy from, the masters of cognitive therapy. It was kind of invented there, and then positive psychology, because I work with Marty Seligman, who was, we were kind of co-inventing the concept of using positive psychology as a way to improve mental health at that time. And then also the Penn program for stress management, or the Penn program for mindfulness now, where I learned mindfulness. So it's like I kind of learned everything out there that works and got really passionate about the idea of translating those things into a format where people could actually reach them, because I was very frustrated by the time I got out of grad school, realizing people don't get access to the things that work. Millions and millions of tax dollars go into demonstrating that if you teach people X and Y in this specific format, that it will prevent depression, prevent anxiety, treat depression, all of these things. But then it's like in a file drawer somewhere, never to actually see the light of day. Right. So I got super passionate about technology as a way to disseminate what works to the general public, where I really saw these huge gaps where people weren't able to get care even if they wanted it, and then the care they got wasn't necessarily evidence-based. So step one of my origin story is kind of like this person who really cares about that.
Yep.
And then the other thing that was sort of percolating at that time, which is really kind of a central thread for me, is I, in my dissertation research, discovered with Marty Seligman that if you know that a person is depressed and you teach them ways that are sort of more positively focused, don't really ever talk about their depression at all, you could still fix their depression. Like, what? Like, you don't ever have to bring it up. You don't ever have to focus on depression or get all disease focused. Right. People can walk away from 8 weeks with you significantly improved, and you never brought up depression. So that was like a huge kind of career defining moment too, to kind of realize that.
And that's counter norms, right? That's counter, logical thinking, that you have to kind of go deep.
Yeah, you have to go deep and you have to drill into the problem that's causing the depression. But, between behavioral activation, right, which is kind of just the idea that if you're depressed and you're lying around and not doing anything, that makes it worse. And if you can just get into doing something, that has a kind of upward spiral effect. Between that and the fact that a lot of depression is negative biases, where there might be good things in your life, but you're not ever going to pay attention to them because the negative things are just so powerful and overwhelming that actually tweaking things so that there's a more even balance does the trick.
Love it. I've been sweeping things under the carpet for years.
It's obvious,
there's a lot
Jim.
to unpack there.
It's Sorry, obvious. No, it's obvious. This is why this is our intervention every Wednesday. So for mainly Jim, but actually I wanted to double click. It's actually interesting what you said, right? Because while 8 weeks and you are talking to the patient, but at the end of the day, you're spending X amount of time in that office chair, virtual chair, whatever. But most of the time, those patients are by themselves, and that's where sort of I would assume that's where the deep thoughts come in and all of that. So I'm just kind of curious, in that 8 weeks, and let's call it an hour a week or whatever that might be, how does that actually improve it? Because 23 hours a day, you're still in your own head.
Well, and a lot of my training in graduate school was all around this idea of, they probably call it something better than homework now, but homework, right? It's like, it's not really about what you're doing with the client that 1 hour. It's about what you're asking them to spend the next week playing with or trying to do. And that has a really great corollary to digital tools, where, you might be able to prompt them every day, hey, remember, you're going to try that thing today. Or even better yet, detecting at the time when a person might need that and being like, hey, it's that time, let's do that thing we discussed. But the other thing, this was like, I was an undergraduate at the time. I started to read. So this was, I'm not going to date myself, but decades ago, that there were published studies that found that if you compared in-person psychotherapy with a person reading a book written by a therapist that was sort of step-by-step activities that are like, here's how you do this thing that if we were in therapy, I'd teach you to do, that the effects were indistinguishable. It worked just as well if a person was motivated enough to read and practice what was in the book versus if somebody went to therapy and was motivated enough to do what their therapist told them. So once I understood, you could kind of break techniques. There are important things that you can get from a therapist, but they're mostly motivational and adherence related. They're, what kind of drives you to continue practicing, but the techniques themselves, there's not some magical thing that happens when a human says how to do it to you versus if you learn about how to do it in text or from an AI chatbot. The techniques are the techniques. And those kind of active ingredients can be taught in a lot of different ways. And most importantly, can be reinforced between sessions.
I like your comment about active ingredients, right? Because we've talked about, especially in kind of digital therapies, active ingredients could be colors, active ingredients could be sounds, active ingredients could be the voices that come through it, right? So it's interesting you mentioned active ingredients in that context as well.
Yeah, I think that active ingredients can maybe most especially be about the individualized, personalized fit to that particular person. So like part of why I got very passionate about the idea of not just bringing in cognitive therapy, right? And like a lot of products and companies are kind of religiously affiliated, right? They have just the CBT is the thing that they do. But the truth is, like, not everybody I tried to do CBT with, because I was in a CBT practicum, and so I was required to practice the CBT skills, it wasn't a good fit for everybody. And, there's pretty good research that shows that you have to believe the story behind the therapy you're being asked to do. It has to feel plausible to you for it to actually help you in any way. So I got really interested in this idea of having multiple options and finding the right way to match people to the one that's going to work best for them, because there's and I would say the active ingredient might be core. Like, let's say like the active ingredient is like rethinking when you think about your day, like rethinking how you do that. Like, what do you take into account when you think about, like, did I have a good day today? But the way that you get there could be mindfulness based, right? It could be sort of like sitting with how you're feeling right now and kind of thinking, okay, so how do I really feel, as opposed to like what's going through my head. But you could also get into a positive psychology approach where you're much more focused on like, okay, so what are the good things that actually happened today? And let me really savor those things. And the end point might be the same, right? There are different paths to get there.
Another quick plug, you mentioned the word mindfulness. So Acacia will be with us next week on a mindfulness panel with some other awesome panelists, including one of the early investors, Charlie Hartwell. Charlie into Happify and 10% Better and Insight Timer and sort of all the household names and Headspace. So a little plug for the viewers, sign up at yourcoach.health.
So I've got a question. Does anyone ever get upset? Like in medicine, sometimes when you come up with a cure, you get this interesting group of patients that are upset that there's a cure because they get identified by their disease. So, so you have the patient that goes for an infusion in a hospital and becomes friends and meets the nurse and it becomes part of their routine. And then all of a sudden you cure, whatever the condition is. And they're upset because they no longer have it. Is there a case in mental health that if you like, don't take away my depression from me because I'm identified with it? I'm just asking for a friend.
It's just, a hypothetical question, right? It's interesting because I remember, we had this deal with Sanofi a couple of years ago that we signed around MS. And so we spent some time trying to understand how to generalize what we were doing at Happify, which is really kind of taking mindfulness and positive psychology and CBT and making it digital, and trying to do that in the case of MS. We had a couple of different distinct camps. Some folks were just like, why do you keep talking about my MS? Like, I'm just a person, man, leave it alone. And then there was a whole other camp that was like, wait, this doesn't even mention my MS. Are you for real? Like, is this legitimate? Can this possibly help me? Right. So like, I think that different people have different orientations to their disease and like what it means to improve. But I think what we see a lot more is about, what kind of messaging people want. about what it is that they're doing and the nature of what they're doing. Is it a lifelong journey to wellness, in which case it never ends? Is it a temporary thing where we're just going to like whip this thing, whip this thing up and get it out of my system, or is it an ongoing relationship? And I think there's something for everybody in that kind of messaging, depending on what you're looking for. But right, like what you're talking about are things like loneliness and like wanting to be connected, and
Right.
there are ways to tackle those in digital interventions without having it necessarily be about a disease, and those can be much more kind of ongoing, lifelong, practices.
But you bring up a point around, again, back to this personalization. For some people, CBT may work. For others, will not. For some people, they're happy to be relieved of depression. Others may have kind of like why did you heal me already? Right? It will be a spectrum. It will be a spectrum of individualization around all of this, all the choices that we make. Right, and that's
another place, though, where I think that therapists have been providing such a valuable service for many years as the only entity that was capable of tailoring in that way. And as AI becomes more and more sophisticated, that's becoming scalable too. And that's important because there just like physically are not enough therapists, right? I think everybody on this call knows that, in terms of doctors and therapists, that the demand far outstripped the ability to kind of provide care. So recent developments have made it seem more plausible that algorithms can take everything they know about you and everything that's happening on your wearables and everything you're entering into a product and tell you the right thing to do, the way that 30 years ago only a therapist could listen to you for a few months and be like, this is what you should do.
And when you line up all these, like all the tools, like when you think about all the different tools out for mental health and cognitive therapy, and that's all being digitized, like how are we going to line them all up in 5 years from now and compare, like where do you think that they just come in with such a point of view that it just is like that fits for you, or it's because it's reimbursable?
Have you seen the Hunger Games?
It's a big wrestling match, and it's like Happify. I'm not gonna say it.
No, it's true, and like you're right, and like you I'm sure both of you have observed the recent trend towards mergers and acquisitions in this area, right? So it's a combination of. I wish I'm not really joking. I think things are going to consolidate, and things are going to battle it out, and a few will emerge as the victors, and those are going to be the ones that are kind of still standing. But my personal opinion is that the ones that are going to win are either ones that do one thing exceedingly well, or the ones that really tackle precision care. So, if you just have your one thing and you do it really well, you don't have to worry so much about figuring out what different things to offer patients, because it's just your one thing. But if you are going to offer a variety of things, my sense is that that's really only a winning strategy if you can assign people smartly and not just let them pick or have a ton of content.
Yeah. And are we like fundamental? Like I always think, like when I worked in the area of anti-TNF inhibitors, like products like Humira that would tackle rheumatoid arthritis, and it tackles Crohn's disease, and it tackles, say, psoriasis. And what we found was that patients that are on the dermatological medications tend to cycle. And someone that has severe rheumatoid arthritis might be a more classic chronic patient. If you think for mental health, are people constantly cycling through looking for new treatments to deal with their mental health? Like, is that the nature of it? Or do you think there's some products that will take care of you, throughout your life?
I think it can kind of be like weight loss, where like there's so many different approaches, and like people try things and that doesn't work, so they try a different thing. But you don't really hear about, a success story of like, oh, so-and-so, lost 20% of their body weight doing this thing, but then they just tried something different, right? It's because it's not the right thing for them. And you see that pattern all over the place. So, I think it's, if there was something that worked for people long-term, they would be sticking with it. And that to me is a marker of, and I think patient churn is just a huge thing in digital therapeutics in general. It's that one, digital therapeutics aren't necessarily keeping the long game in mind, right? This isn't like a thing this isn't a series of habits you're going to adopt for the rest of time. And as long as you do, you'll stay well, which, by the way, is how cognitive therapy basically works, right? You do cognitive therapy for 8 to 12 weeks with a therapist, or you read the book or whatever. And assuming you remember the techniques and keep using them, you will be treated long term.
Right.
Yeah. But I'll tell you,
doesn't work.
I hit my 1,500-day streak on Headspace. With full disclosure, I've had to reset it 2 or 3 times due to travel. However,
blame the travel, Eugene.
Blaming the travel on this one. But, you know, even though I have all the techniques in my head, that little gamification component, I think we even talked about this on one of the shot episodes, but it kind of keeps me at it, right? And I want to ensure that I do at least a few minutes outside of what my daily breathing activities are anyway. I do agree with you that I think there is a churn. I think, you know, again, if you're feeling better, whatever that may mean to you, you move off, right? It's actually the same drop off. I mean, patients stop taking their drugs because they think they feel better. They think they feel better. And sort of similar comparisons to the DTX, even though we've had so many discussions, how do we not put a DTX in the same pill box, right? As the actual pills?
Yeah, and Silver Cloud even published a study that basically looked at reasons why people dropped out of their clinical trials. And one of the leading reasons was they're like, I got what I needed, I'm done.
Right.
Which is sort of counterintuitive, right? Because like, don't you attribute your improvement to the thing that you were doing?
Yeah, it's like a new bar though, right? Like it's like you said, like if you have a fitness goal and you achieve it, then you want to go for the next one, or or whatever, or you miss it, then you think you attribute it to it. You're missing it for the
listen. I've been working on my 6-pack all my life. It's somewhere there. Just
it's in your soul. Somewhere.
You should have a cognitive behavior buddy like I do with Eugene. So like every Wednesday, one of us is like needs to be picked up and the other one needs a little help. So we just cycle through. And then sometimes we pick up the guest, or they pick us up.
Well, so by the way, I promised, I was texting with Acacia, I promised her that typically we kind of suck the energy out of our guest. But this time we're going to have to give energy to Acacia. So,
Yeah. I'm feeling it. I feel energetic today, so I'm happy to give you some.
It's like coffee in a human being. Just
there you go.
Right. So yeah, I've been described as caffeinated.
I'm not sure where we paused on your journey. We sort of double clicked 17 times into all different topics. But let's get back to Acacia.
No, I'm with it. Yeah. So, I think I just emerged from graduate school. Thinking about all of the things that I had sort of highlighted about people not actually being able to access things that work. So it's like I spent all of graduate school developing new things that work, and then realized like nobody's ever going to see these things. This is ridiculous. And even when I tried to put it in technology, I kind of realized like the technology things that I developed sucked, right? Like I was some academic, like what did I know about how to develop an engaging? And at that time, like nobody knew in academia. I don't know whether that's still the case because I haven't been in academia for, a long time now, but it's, my family's up to hijinks over there. It's late. So, I was really sort of horrified at the low quality of intervention that I had managed to make with my one-shot web designer in 2009. And so I kind of issued a cry for help into the audience at a conference where I was like, look, we know it works. We can't get it to people, and academics don't know how to do technology at all. Like, why are we not collaborating with industry? Why are we not, taking advantage of what people know about, Netflix and these, all kinds of very engaging ways that people were interacting with technology. And at that time, Tomer and Ofer, the co-founders, the eventual co-founders of Happify. I was the first person they talked to about the Happify concept before it had a name.
Wow.
So,
before it had a name.
Yeah, no, it was, they just had this idea that like, they'd built up a casual gaming company, and they wanted to make something that leveraged that to actually improve people's
by the way,
health and
also,
well-being.
I know I'm obsessed with names, but epic name, Happify, you just feel happier.
It's like the best name, exactly.
Although apparently pharma clients tend to find it puzzling because they want to call it antidepressant antidepressify, right? They don't
Right.
understand the concept of like promising happiness because people want to know what they're getting. But back to that whole destigmatized thing, I'm like so pumped about. It's like Happify as a title really
Right.
conveys
They
what
find
we're
it
trying to do.
they find it condescending or
Yeah.
Right, exactly. They're like, but happiness isn't even like a cool or important thing. But of course, there's lots and lots of research now that shows that while happiness and depression aren't the opposite of each other, if you're really happy, it's very hard to be depressed.
right.
So
Like what we were with Carlos Rodarte. We were with him, and he was saying he was feeling a little bit down. So he was like, he walked in the room and he's like, oh, these DTXs companies were there and they were talking about the impact DTX had. He's like, I'm kind of like I'm like the opposite of a DTX. I'm like depressing people today. and he's not. He's a super positive guy. He's a super like nice guy. And I'm like, yeah. So we named him the RDTX. The reverse DTX.
The reverse DTX. I like it.
That's not a nickname you want.
No, but he's not that way at all. He's always positive and supportive.
#RDTX.
Yeah, I guess as long as you're calling him that ironically.
Yeah, it's ironic. I don't want to get in trouble with Carlos.
Yeah, so they're sitting out in the audience, they're hearing me talk about all these things, and they're going, oh wait, but that's what we're trying to do. And so we started talking, and I eventually hopped over from my tenure track professor position to just do this because I was seeing the impact and the number of patients we were reaching, and thought I got to double down on this. So yeah, I've been with Happify for 10 years total now. I recently hit my 10-year anniversary.
Did you get a watch?
And
what did you get?
Kind words in a group meeting.
Group therapy.
Yeah, but now I'm thinking about a watch, so thanks.
Yeah, I got screwed.
I didn't say that. Yeah, so that was. I mean, it's been a long ride from a really general concept to something that has become much more sophisticated in terms of tackling mind and body and doing it in a variety of chronic disease areas, not just kind of, I think we started off very much being consumer and employee mental health, and doubling down on the more clinical side, releasing a prescription digital therapeutic for generalized anxiety disorder and major depressive disorder. So really kind of encompassing the entire spectrum of ways that you can intervene on a person's mental health to benefit their physical health, to benefit their interaction with a mental disorder, or the original metrics of work productivity and engagement.
Right.
And
you must be one of the longest serving digital health scientific officers or employees in general. 10 years,
but in a young way.
In a young way. You're one of the OGs. Yeah, you started when you were just coming out of school, so
definitely.
So maybe can we double click, because I think Happify is actually, to my knowledge, I think the only DTX that has kind of a self-paced non-prescription but also a prescription DTX. Your thoughts, and I'm trying to think about on the spot here, but I think anyway, can you talk about and again, I think on one side it's a bit of a spectrum, but kind of some of your thoughts on non-prescription and prescription DTX. I know Brian Dolan would love this discussion.
Boy, it's so hard to do them at the same time, because from a regulatory standpoint, you're really you have to meet all of the standards of the prescription side, which are high and make studies expensive. And remember, I'm like coming from the science part of this, so like I have to run the studies, and like you're talking about the difference between a study that costs $40,000 and a study that costs $2 million, even though it's basically the same study, because it has to be done in a certain way to kind of meet those standards. And so there's that piece where your organization, like we had to grow to sort of be capable of that. And it was a pretty big, I mean, we just went from 40 to 170 in about a year. So, and a lot of that, not all of it, but a significant portion of that is tied to growing our regulatory function and our quality function, so that we can do all the things we need to do to be making regulated products. But I think the hardest part, at least from a research strategy perspective, is when you've got multiple products for the same kind of rough purpose, but at different levels of regulation, and you have to make them clearly different. Like,
Right.
how's a prescription product for depression and anxiety disorders different from a product for managing symptoms of depression and anxiety, which is different from a wellness product that sort of indirectly tackles symptoms of depression and anxiety.
Right.
That's a lot of work.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's about the claims you make, right? As well, right?
Yeah.
And I think obviously going through the FDA process is much more stringent on the claims that you're making out of that, right?
Yeah, but you got to also design studies where, if they're held side by side, it's clear how the claims are different and how the price points should be different. And that's not always possible, because if you're taking something with a similar mechanism of action, you have to be really careful to titrate dose, to think about how you're measuring outcomes so that they don't just look like the same thing. It's it's a pretty challenging proposition, actually.
Right. No, it's fascinating. And even like you said, the organization kind of configuring towards a direct to consumer offering everything they have to do to be successful, because that's not easy. How do you communicate your offering, and how do you make claims, and how do you gamify it and keep people on, versus just winning over the endorsement of a clinician that says, I'm going to use this because it's clinically validated, right? And that's
or
also
health
tough.
plans or pharma companies you want to do deals with. All
Which
of these different audiences have different things.
Which is easier? Which is easier?
Oh, you just said one is easy, which is really cute.
No, I said no. Which is easier?
No, it's no. None of it's easy. Honestly,
nothing is easy.
Any of them by themselves would be easier than them together, right? It's less that any one. Actually, that's not totally true, because I would say that when you're doing a product that you're ultimately going to submit to FDA, and you're having pre-submission meetings with them, they're not always completely do this and you'll be fine, right? They're not going to give you that level of feedback, but they are giving you feedback, which is really a lot less mysterious than say a health plan, right? Where if there's one sentiment in the last year that I've heard of every panel that I've attended or been on, it's health plans don't know exactly what they want, but they know that whatever we're giving them is not it. Right. Not us personally, but digital therapeutics. It's they want more evidence, more different types of evidence. And they want more. And so that's tough, because you don't have a direct line to speak to them, where it's I think FDA is still figuring out what they want too, but they'll talk to you.
Right.
Well, the incentives are different, right? I mean, if you think about a health plan, their sole job is to do risk management.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it, right? And so
in negotiation, right? It's a negotiation. It's a procurement function fundamentally, right? For a plan. And I don't know what I want, but I know it's not you kind of approach to life. Right?
So
absolutely. It's but also I think there's I've realized, at least for the last few years, that when you are in a new market, it's your job to educate the people you're selling to about what they want.
Right.
And so we saw this a lot with employers, where employers are kind of I don't know, I've got this budget. What am I going to spend it on? And if you can come in there and be on this, right? And really get them to see how cool it would be for them to do that, because they may have never seen another solution like yours, or there's 2 or 3, it's not they're inundated with options. So there's definitely this, educational component that can be a bit more tricky.
Listen, anytime you're doing anything new, right? So being cognitive, by the way, I know we promised Acacia to get you back to the family and or sleep, one or the other. Should we move
inversely correlated?
Yeah.
Right.
Spoken like a true scientist.
Right.
Jim, shall we go to the question? I mean, there's so much to double click on or keep clicking, but I want to be respectful. Plus, Marina is waiting for our date here in Milano.
100%. There's a lot.
And hungry? And hangry. Okay, so this is not good.
Yeah.
Hangry.
I was in that phase earlier. I understand.
Oh, you were in the phase?
We get hungry from Marina. We get sleep deprived. Okay, here we go. So imagine yourself, Acacia, you're an academic that has come up with the brilliant, game-changing idea to transform the world and distribute cognitive therapy to everybody and save millions and millions of people in many, many different ways. And so you've got this great idea, and this young person is going, what advice would you give to that person as they go out and start their company? What core advice would you try to impart to them based on your 10 years of experience at Happify?
So I think, I'm actually about to talk about this at the Frontiers Conference tomorrow, but
a little preview.
I think that many of us who come from an academic background are guilty of making products for nobody in particular that we think that somebody needs. And to not derive the contents of a product from actually talking to patients and really like working with patients at every step to understand how it's working for them, maybe in ways you can't possibly anticipate. Like I talk about in my talk, migraines, because I have migraines, and like there are all these well-meaning apps to help you keep track of your migraines, but they're like, I hear you're having, it feels like an ice pick sticking through your head. Why don't I ask you 25 questions? And it's like, that are on a lighted screen that you can't look at. Like if you don't talk to patients about things, they're just basic things that will not work about your product. And it's a big mistake coming out of academia to just sort of assume, well, academically, I know that people need this, and so I'm just going to make something to deliver it. It's like a delivery mechanism. But if you really want to actually penetrate people's lives, you have to understand what they're looking for and what their life consists of so that you can become a part of that. And I think that that's something that industry folks who get a scientist figure out, but scientists who get an industry person or who just start a company themselves may not figure out until they're many years down the path with something that isn't that good. Ask me how I know, right? Like, because I had my own things that I made in graduate school, and I put years of research into something that just wasn't a good product. It was never going to be commercially successful in a patient's life. So I think it's huge to not just think that that what you're making is needed, but to actually find people who want it and make it something that's going to help them and that you verify with them is going to help them. It seems obvious.
Yeah,
it's not.
Speaking of another kind of professor, Chris Wasden, is he actually coming to Milano tomorrow?
No, he's
or
calling
he's doing
in.
He's calling in with you. Okay, you guys are doing. Yeah, that's.
Although I just saw him last week, so I mean, it doesn't go very. I mean, we're almost like we spend a lot of time together, so I'll try to channel him as much as I can.
Excellent.
Bring the Chris Wasden party to us.
Well, listen, we also got to do an honorary quick mention, as always, of Matthew Holt and DaMassa. I mean, that's like a given. They're somewhere around Milano as well, but like this is a running.
Send my regard.
We always tag them on every episode, I think, at this point.
Excellent.
Well, again, thank you. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for not falling asleep, and I will see you in person tomorrow.
Have a great conference.
Thank you for having me. Have a great night.
Nice to meet you. Have a great conference.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.